Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and this is a very special edition of Superhero Rewind. This has really been the decade for superhero movies, and I think it's one of the things that will define it historically. If VH1 ever does a We Love the OOs, Marvel's onslaught of superhero films will probably be one of those items that's fondly fussed over. At the risk of revealing my opinions of a bunch of movies I haven't done reviews for yet, I've decided to count down my top 10 of the decade, in which there have been so many good and so many bad. Considering my goal here has always been to review every single superhero movie ever made, I'll do full reviews of all this eventually, and of course I've already done some of these, so look forward to more in-depth looks at each of these. I'll just touch on them now, and you'll have to forgive my voice, I've been sick. Number 10 is Unbreakable from 2000. Now, I know it isn't based on a comic book, and that's one of the things I love about it. Unbreakable is one of the only M. Night Shyamalan movies I can even stomach, but besides some of the awkward and at times cheesy angles and camera moves, it's a great script, and was a very original idea. The O. Henry ending on this one wasn't such a ham ending in comparison to some of his others, and I never get tired of watching Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson play off each other. I like how it's a movie about the real comic collecting world, while simultaneously it's about a fictional superhero type, Bruce Willis being the indestructible man who never realized it until he was in an accident where he should have died, and Samuel Jackson, the brittle and therefore very bitter man who loves superheroes but can't be one. So instead, but maybe you haven't seen it. Do yourself a favor and pick it up if you haven't. Number 9 is Constantine. I know a lot of Hellblazer fans didn't care for it, and I'm not terribly familiar with the source material myself, but I thought this was just a solid movie. Perhaps Keanu Reeves is an odd pick for such a rugged and rough-around-the-edges sort of character, but I did think he created a character of his own, and it was very different from what he did in The Matrix. It's wonderfully stylized, and I lost myself in the mythos. I especially love all the stuff about Gabriel and Satan, and it's the most original representation of hell I've ever seen, where it's the real world but a post-apocalyptic version, and despite its dark themes, it's also quirky and has a good sense of humor about itself. Shia LaBeouf did this before Transformers made him hugely famous. He plays Constantine's sidekick Chaz, and it's still my favorite performance from him. Number 8 is Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along Blog. This is a strange pick, but I couldn't help it. I'm a sucker for originals, and I'm also a sucker for Joss Whedon. Dr. Horrible is a brilliant and hilarious parody of superheroes, and some of my favorite superhero properties, like The Tick, happen to be parodies. Yes, the songs are clever and catchy. Yes, Neil Patrick Harris is hilarious, but very few people talk about Dr. Horrible as a superhero movie, and it's a great one. What makes it great is how it reverses the roles of villain and hero, and makes Dr. Horrible, who really is the bad guy, the protagonist, and the most likable character in the movie. And of course, Captain Hammer, the superhero, is the most unlikable character. Coolest thing to come out of the writer's strike, and hats off to Whedon and his team for once again pushing envelopes during a really tough time. I can't wait for the sequel. Number 7 is Spider-Man. It's hard not to include this one just because Willem Dafoe is so darn much fun to watch, but this was the unexpected smash that made the whole rest of the decade possible. Marvel already had Blade and X-Men, which were successes, but nobody knew how much money Spider-Man was going to make, and its popularity is really the reason there were enough superhero movies this decade to even do a top 10. It's not a perfect film. I always thought the plot was a little cookie-cutter, a little predictable, and I will never let up on Kirsten Dunst as being a terrible and whiny Mary Jane, but it's a charming film. It's colorful. It's the opposite of Batman, which is what it needed to be. The web-slinging looks great, and the origin is done just as it should have been. It's better as a standalone film than the first X-Men was, but like that film, it did pave the way for a better one. My number 6 is Daredevil the Director's Cut. I know I'm nearly the only person who would ever dare put this on a top 10 list, but if you've been keeping up with the show, you already know how I feel about Daredevil. No, the theatrical cut probably wouldn't have made this list, but this version is so complex, it has so much character stuff in it, it's got so much style, that it even beats out Spider-Man for me, and here's the main reason for that. I was already a huge Spider-Man fan before that movie came out, so I was pretty particular about what I thought it should be. Sam Raimi did a good job, but I will still always prefer comic book Spider-Man. Now, I never really cared about Daredevil before this. I had tried to read him before, and just couldn't get into it. This movie turned me into a Daredevil fan, and it made me realize why Matt Murdock is an interesting and worthwhile character, and that's why it makes it so high on the list. Number 5 is Spider-Man 2. This movie is great because Sam Raimi finally found a perfect balance between Peter Parker's regular human stuff and the superhero stuff. I still find most of Mary Jane's dialogue just shy of nauseating, but I really did enjoy the idea that even with superpowers, Peter Parker has too much on his plate and he can't be everywhere he needs to be. Sometimes he's played up as being maybe a little too depressed, and the thing about him losing his powers is completely bogus, but everything about this movie is very human, and I like that. Critics always point to Doc Ock as the model of a good comic book movie villain because he isn't evil for the sake of it, and he really wrestles with his conscience, and I was impressed that he was developed far more than I had seen in the comics. It also has a very good sense of continuity, and uses the events of the first film to strengthen itself. My number 4 is X2. Once again, I've done my bit on this movie, and if you saw that video, you know I gave it a 4 out of 4. It's a nearly perfect film in all respects, especially because of that fascinating character triad with Professor X, Stryker, and Magneto. It takes what was set up in the first film and finally tells a compelling and relevant story, and it also makes really good use of almost all of its characters and their powers, even though it is very Wolverine-centered. Number 3 is Iron Man. Just like Spider-Man, this was the kind of success nobody saw coming, but it happened for a different reason. Jon Favreau took a character everybody's heard of, but most fans were never especially fascinated with, and made it better. He and Robert Downey Jr. gave Tony Stark attitude and a quick wit, which went a long way to humanizing him, and it just made the whole thing work. And from the new trailer for Iron Man 2, it looks so far like the sequel hasn't lost that sense of style and character depth. My number 2 is Watchmen. Fans were polarized on it, but I was already a big fan of the graphic novel, and the film did everything I hoped it would. It was epic, it didn't mind being long enough to incorporate all the main story points, and it was well cast, well acted, and most importantly, it was mostly played straight. I had a lot of geek-out moments when recognizing not just bits of lifted dialogue, but consecutive line after line that was word for word what Alan Moore had written. Rorschach has always been one of my favorite characters, and I like him even more after seeing the movie. I personally think changing the ending really was a good move, and is more poignant and perhaps less silly than the fake alien invasion idea from the novel. If you like the film, but haven't seen the director's cut yet, do see it, because the scenes that were cut were absolutely worthy of the film. It stands okay without them, but you'll especially appreciate them if you know the novel. Okay, this is an absolute cheat, but I couldn't think of a better way to do this. My number 1 of the decade is a tie between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. Now, I'm not saying they both deserve first because since they're sequels, it's like they're one movie. Not at all. I gave Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 2 spots, and I'm sure you have no idea why 3 didn't make the list. Batman Begins and Dark Knight are 2 very different movies, with different motivations and goals. The issue is, regardless of Dark Knight's popularity and huge box office numbers, I still can't bring myself to call it better than Batman Begins. I really do think these 2 movies together are the best superhero films of the decade, possibly even the best films of the decade. Batman Begins is simply the most impressive superhero origin story I've ever seen. It does Batman's origin better than it was ever done in the comics, and it manages to tell a compelling story at the same time. Begins is not a setup film at all in my mind. Sure, it leaves room for sequels, but if Dark Knight had never been made, it still would have remained an excellent, excellent movie. The reason is because it's finally a Batman movie that's about Batman. He gets character development and a lot of it. We understand why he decides to become a costume crime fighter. We're given deep insights into his complex psychology. And yet, it's not so dark that it isn't wonderfully entertaining. And the theme of fear, as a motivator, resonates well throughout and is utilized by every major character, especially the villains. Dark Knight is also exceptional, but it has different themes. It deals with what it means to be a hero and the kind of sacrifice that takes. It's a much darker idea, but once again it manages to be very entertaining. In a lot of ways it's more creative than Begins, especially in interpreting classic villains Joker and Two-Face. It reinvented the Joker in a new, fresh way, and somehow made him about as scary and about as likable as he's ever been. And it mostly plays Harvey Dent / Two-Face straight out of Batman Long Halloween, which was also a very good move. But the story is more about Gordon and Dent than it's even about Batman, which is my biggest criticism of it. Though Batman does make the big sacrifice at the end, and he has to deal with the idea that not all villains have a psychology that can be reasoned out, his character does get lost a little in the shuffle. And Begins is also a tighter film. Dark Knight tries to do so much in one movie that it has a couple of false endings. You think the film is over before it really is. So I can't put one over the other. They're both brilliant, and they both deserve the number 1 spot, so that's what I've done. I hope to see some comments with your opinions, and feel free to leave your top 5 or 10 as well. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope you have some great parties to go to tonight. If I may suggest it, consider ringing in the new year with one of these movies. Happy New Year, and Vince and I will see you again in 2010.